promote us. All right, we are live after the Blazers unfortunately have their 4-game win streak come to an end against the Atlanta Hawks, and what was a game that would just kind of set up to be really tough for Portland. The final score is 123-114. Stotts goes ahead and pulls the starters with about 4 or 5 minutes left after the Hawks push a 20-point lead. Blazers on the second night of a back-to-back after beating Boston in a close game yesterday. Portland now 4-1, which is still good on this 6-game road trip. What'd you see tonight, John?
Yeah, they just looked a little slow. Obviously having to do with the tornado warning this morning, and then the back-to-back, the late night coming in. It's too bad. They had the offense going in the first half, but when they went cold is when they couldn't keep even with the Hawks, and that's when the Hawks ended up pulling away and getting the win. It was cool to see Melo get up to 10th all time. It was cool to see him cook early. But other than that, it was mainly just kind of one of those forgettable games, I feel like.
It was pretty forgettable, and you could just it was around the second half after Portland went on a little run in the third quarter. Well, I'll even go back a little before that. Atlanta built their lead to 13 in the third quarter, and by that point, I really thought that they would just pull away at that point.
Yeah.
Just because of how tired Portland looked, but Portland actually went on a little spurt and cut it all the way down to 1. But then Atlanta hit 10 by the end of the third quarter. And I think it was 7 because Covington hit a 3, but Portland just didn't have the legs, it seemed like, to make the multiple runs they would have needed to win a game against an Atlanta team that I didn't even realize they had been this. I knew they'd been good since the All-Star break, but they're 22-10 since the All-Star break. They have one of the better records in the whole league.
Yeah.
So they've been playing really, really well, and Portland just didn't seem to have the legs tonight.
Yeah, apparently since they hired Nate McMillan, or since they fired Lloyd Pierce and promoted Nate McMillan, their record is, I think it's 22. I think that's since then, or maybe it's like 25-10. Like maybe it's like right before, but still.
Yeah. And right after that was when Portland, again, just all going back to the tired legs. Some of the telltale signs that a team is tired is the perimeter defense isn't rotating as quickly, which Portland's perimeter defense is already bad. But today it wasn't just bad, but it was also slow. You could tell they just weren't moving their feet as quickly. Teams tend to go more ISO. And we've really seen Portland go a lot away from the ISO on this win streak. But they did have more possessions than have been normal this road trip, where they just kind of threw the ball to Dame or CJ or Carmelo and just said, go shoot a jump shot, basically. And then a lot of the jump shots fell flat. A lot of Nurkic's hook shots that he would normally put in fell flat. Cantor, maybe not getting some of the rebounds he'd normally get, allowing some offensive rebounds. Just all the telltale signs of a team being fatigued were there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could see they were tired. It's too bad. The second half of the schedule has been really brutal. I know it's been super tough for a ton of teams. I saw the Lakers have 3 back-to-backs in between now and the end of the season. Like, it is like the schedule is so crazy now. It's going to be interesting to see what shakes out, especially with, I'm not sure what the situation is with the Portland loss and whatever's going to happen tonight with LA and Denver. But with all the games being played, we really have no idea what the seeding is going to be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. You wish Portland would have just gotten 2 more of those games that they almost got when they were on their losing streak, like maybe the home game to Boston or that game to Denver where Powell just barely missed the game-winning float shot. You just wish Portland had been able to pull out one of those. They're just not. Portland doesn't have that many truly horrible losses this season. I mean, there's always a couple. I mean, the Minnesota loss and the OKC loss are the glaring ones. But I mean, the Jazz got swept by Minnesota. Every good team in the NBA is going to have some weird games like that. But you just wish Portland hadn't gone on such a long streak where they didn't beat a team with a winning record. Because we wouldn't even be having this I would feel comfortable even if Portland just had a game and a half or a 2-game lead on Dallas at this point, just with that tiebreaker. But unfortunately, Dallas has a really easy schedule down the stretch. Now they have lost games that they're not supposed to, and they've won games that they are not supposed to. So Dallas is hit or miss, and obviously we've seen the Lakers' struggles. But I mean, Portland obviously always kind of pushes it down to the last minute, and if they have to play in the play-in tournament, whatever, because I think they'd probably win the first game, but.
Yeah, and it depends on what the matchup is. Because I see Golden State is at, I believe, 9. But they're either tied or they're a game behind whoever's at 8. But they're so inconsistent. It's going to be really interesting to see what the play-in tournament, like what the order is even going to be, who's going to slip to 9 and 10. It appears that the teams have kind of distanced themselves from, I believe it's New Orleans. I think there's like a 4-game lead now from 10 to 11.
Yeah, the teams that will be in the postseason are pretty clear cut in the Western Conference at this point, and in the East too.
Yeah,
it seems extremely unlikely that Toronto's going to catch Washington.
Yeah, they're not. They don't appear to be good enough.
So yeah, just because this was kind of a forgettable game. If you have the standings pulled up, do you want to just run through each one and maybe just do some predictions?
100%. I haven't pulled up. Do you want East or West Conference first?
Let's go East first.
Okay. So the 1-8 matchup, or should I do by actually play-in first?
Maybe we should do the play-in first. Let's try.
So the 7-8 matchup for the 8 seed is Boston Charlotte. Kind of interesting matchup.
That would be really interesting.
Fun game. A lot of good players.
I would expect probably Boston to win that game just because of playoff experience, even though Boston has been so underwhelming this year.
Yeah.
But Charlotte could win it. Charlotte's they have nothing to lose. They're just going out there having fun, playing a really exciting brand of basketball. They just got LaMelo Ball back. We saw that ridiculous full court pass he threw. I would just think Boston star power would probably maybe outlast, assuming they're mostly healthy. And Boston just has better players.
They do.
Makes a difference 100%. In the playoffs. So I don't know. What do you think about that one?
I pick the upset. I'll take Charlotte. Boston's been a lot like Portland. They've been very, very inconsistent. They shoot a lot of jump shots, and sometimes that doesn't get it done. I think that they're going to go through a lot of struggles in the playoffs. I mean, I don't think they're really geared for the playoffs. It's kind of, I don't think the roster is really complete yet. Just because they seem to have a bunch of guys that all play the same positions, kind of like Portland, except for theirs is the wings. Yeah. With no one playing center, and then with Kemba Walker being sidelined for most of the year, no one playing point guard. I mean, they've had to start Peyton Pritchard, who's played well, but he's a rookie. So it's hard to have the same dynamic as he's trying to get equipped to the league. And Charlotte, I mean, they have experience. I mean, they have Gordon Hayward. They have Terry Rozier, both with Boston. Terry Rozier helped lead them to the conference finals. They got some good guys, good young players in Graham, Ball, and Miles Bridges. I'll say they pull the upset.
Okay. And then who would play 9 and 10?
9-10's Indiana, Washington.
I would probably take Washington in that. I have trouble seeing Westbrook and Beal losing win or go home game against a team that doesn't have a player as good as Westbrook or Beal, even if they may have a better team overall.
100%. I think that Washington wins. Westbrook puts up some like ungodly stat line, which means that 10 versus for you be Charlotte versus Washington, and for me it'd be Boston versus Washington.
Sure, to get to the 8 seed, you mean?
Yeah.
I would probably take Washington again, to be honest. I just think having 2 stars really makes a difference when you're more like a bottom feeding playoff team. It's 100%. Not enough. It's not enough against like the Milwaukees and the Philadelphias and the Brooklyns of that conference. But I have a hard time seeing with even as underwhelming as what the rest of Washington's roster is, I have a hard time seeing Westbrook and Beal losing a game, a one in playoff game to a Charlotte team that's been really exciting and fun this year, but their best player is a rookie, as good as LaMelo Ball is.
Yeah.
I have a tough time seeing Westbrook, especially letting them lose that.
Yeah, 100%. And I have Boston beating Washington. I think Boston overall is a better team. Both teams have a lot of star power and are inconsistent, but I just think Boston, I mean, they have more good players. So in the West, we have 7-8 being Portland, Memphis, a rematch of last year's play-in tournament. Who do you got over there?
Portland, Memphis. I would take Portland in a one playoff game.
I think so too.
I think honestly, the two losses to Memphis really kind of seem to have woken Portland up. You saw Damian Lillard come out and just say that, I haven't been playing well, and he's really turned it around on this road trip. I'm still not convinced Portland's going to be in the 7th seed, but they might be. And I would expect them to beat Memphis. Just it's Damian Lillard in a win or go home situation. You would expect him to show up and play well, especially with kind of that chip of still having to beat Memphis at home, even with no fans in the Moda Center. I would expect Portland to get that one done.
100%. I agree. I think Portland gets it done. The experience, just like last year. I don't think Memphis is quite there. I don't think they've quite gelled yet, but I think Portland's just their experience is enough. And then 9-10, San Antonio and Golden State.
I take Golden State, honestly, maybe pretty easily. Yeah. It's interesting because the Spurs are so much better on the road this year than they are at home. But do you really think Steph Curry's going to let the Warriors lose that game? Like, I don't at all.
Yeah. If I was a betting man, I would say Steph Curry is going to be in the playoffs. It's hard to imagine him losing. I mean, realistically, he would have to lose to either Memphis or San Antonio. If what we agree happens. And it's just hard to imagine that he does. He's just being one of the best players in the world. I think he's enough to carry his team to the playoffs.
Yeah, especially against young teams. Or just kind of, young teams like Memphis and San Antonio. I agree that I think Golden State gets the 8th seed.
Yeah. Which means, man, it would be Phoenix, Golden State, Utah, and Portland, Denver, LA, Lakers, and then Dallas and the LA Clippers in the West.
Wow.
Philly, and for you, it would be Washington. Mm-hmm. For me being Boston, Brooklyn for me being Charlotte, for you being Boston, New York Milwaukee, Miami, and then New York, Atlanta.
Okay. Just kind of running through it real quick so we don't go on too long here, but I would take Phoenix. Just they are better than Golden State. I think Steph would maybe help Golden State win 1 or 2 games, but I'd take Phoenix there. In the 4 and the 5, I'll take the Clippers over the Mavericks. I definitely take the Clippers in that series. Yeah. Lakers and Denver would be really interesting. I'm still going to take the Lakers, I think. Just Denver losing Jamal Murray, I think, is going to really show up in the playoffs. And Utah, Portland, I hate to go against Portland, but I just think Utah's better right this year. I'd probably take Utah in that series, although I think Portland could make it pretty interesting and still win it if they got a lot of things bouncing their way. In the East, I'll take, doesn't really matter. You advance Philadelphia and Brooklyn pretty much automatically. Milwaukee, Miami would be a really, really interesting first round series. I'll still take Milwaukee. I think the acquisition of Drew Holiday is going to prove really, really major in the playoffs, even more so than it has in the regular season. I think that's really going to pop for them. And I think they take care of Miami, who just hasn't quite been themselves this year. New York, Atlanta is really interesting. Gosh, that was kind of a toss up to me. I'll probably take the Knicks just because they've both been playing so well though. And Atlanta does have more firepower, but just New York's had the best defense all year. I'll take that in the playoffs against an inexperienced team.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much right there with you with most of the picks. Phoenix and Utah seem to be locks. I don't think Portland's going to be consistent enough to win 4 out of 7. I think they might get 2, maybe 1. They'll keep it competitive in each game, but I don't think they have quite enough. Both of the series involving the LA teams are very interesting to me. I think it's extremely likely that either one could get upset, though. I think it's hard to pick against LeBron in the playoffs. So I have the Lakers moving on, and it's hard to pick against Kawhi too. So I mean, I have the Clippers moving on as well. In the East as well, Philly, Brooklyn. I have probably the Milwaukee as well for the same reasons. I think Drew Holiday and the defense is going to be so good in the playoffs. Even though Miami has a great defensive lineup too, I think Milwaukee's just a little bit better. And then New York as well. I think the defense is going to bode well in the playoffs, though I do think Trae Young is going to play well in the playoffs. I think he's going to put up some big numbers. That one is kind of a toss-up, though. I could easily see Atlanta winning it.
Yeah, and then in the second round, let's see Phoenix and the Clippers. Oh man, that'd be a heck of a series. I'm actually going to take Phoenix in that one. I mean, they're both so good, but I think Phoenix has just proven to be so much deeper than we even realized, I feel like. And I feel like they're more deep than the Clippers are.
Yeah.
And then
Lakers, Utah.
I'll still take the Lakers over Utah, I think. I think that would end up being one of the better series of the playoffs. But it's just LeBron and AD. I still can't really bet against them. Over in the East, I'll take Philly over New York for sure. I just don't think New York has the offensive star power to keep up with Philadelphia.
Nets, Milwaukee.
Wow.
Jeez.
That would be an
tough.
Incredible second round series. I think if Brooklyn's fully healthy, it's hard to pick against them in that. But I'm going to assume they're healthy. I'm going to take Brooklyn. And then kind of just going quick to the conference finals and finals. I honestly think it's going to be LA and Brooklyn still. And I'll still take the Lakers probably. Just until LeBron gets beat, I'm not really going to pick against him, I don't think.
100%. Yeah, I still think Lakers coming out of the West. I think I have the exact same in the West. And the East, I honestly think it's going to be the winner of Brooklyn, Milwaukee coming out of the East. I think the winner is going to beat Philly. I'm not really sure. I honestly could go with either one. Since you picked Brooklyn, I'll pick Milwaukee. I'll go different.
Sure. Gotcha. Do you still have the Lakers winning it all?
Yeah, I still think it's really hard to bet against LeBron. I mean, I know Golden State beat him 3 out of 4 years, but man, I mean, it took a pretty unstoppable team for them to do it.
Right. Well, we'll see what happens in these playoffs. It'll be interesting to watch. Coming up next for Portland is one of the few truly winnable games. I mean, they're all winnable, but one of the easier games left on the schedule that Portland really has to go get at Cleveland on Wednesday night. Portland hoping to finish up the road trip 5-1, which would definitely be a success after the 5-game losing streak. After that, the schedule gets tougher. A huge game coming up Friday night against the Lakers. Still games against the Nuggets and the Suns left on the schedule. So it's not going to be easy for Portland, but they've at least shown in this last week or so that they can stay competitive. Again, tonight they lose to the Hawks 123-114 in a game where they just looked pretty tired against a team that's been playing really well. But thanks to everyone who tuned in for the live stream. We've got a really fun episode with Tanner and Jacob Groves coming up this week on the podcast. They're in Oklahoma now. Going to be new Sooners. They just transferred from Eastern Washington after a really great performance in the NCAA tournament. You can catch that episode and all our previous episodes on our Spotify and on our YouTube channel. On this YouTube channel, we encourage you to subscribe and follow us on all major social media platforms. We're there at Wyball Starters and on SoundCloud as well if you deal with that. So thanks everyone again for listening, and go Blazers.
Yes, sir.